The surprise of the WNBA season so far through the first 4 games might be the team that had the number 1 overall pick. The Atlanta Dream sit 3-1, ready to surprise everybody, maybe? We're going to ask Spencer Nusbaum what he takes away from everything that Rhyne Howard has done. This is the Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is Alex Simon stepping into the co-host chair for Howard Bengtel today. We've got Spencer Nusbaum here for the Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. And we want to let you know, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Check out prizepicks.com and use the promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. And Spencer, as we get ready to talk about the Atlanta Dream, perhaps there's no player who has made a bigger impact, not just in fantasy women's basketball, but actually just in the WNBA period than Rhyne Howard has through 4 games so far, right?
Listen, I don't think a rookie in their first week in the WNBA is supposed to win Conference Player of the Week. They can win maybe, Rookie of the Month or, one of those awards that are reserved for the first-year players. Rhyne Howard, what she's doing with this Atlanta Dream team, I was just talking about it with Alex before we hopped on. It's not something that was supposed to happen. I remember texting people, before the season started and saying, this might be a depressing watch without Tiffany Hayes. I'm not sure that they're going to win, 1, maybe 2 games without her. And right now they're sitting at 3-1, and a lot of that has to be attributed to Rhyne Howard.
And look, you can look at it and it should be noted their schedule has been on the easier side of things when you look at the opponents that they've played so far. They opened the season at Dallas and picked up a nice little win on the road to start the season off by 7 points. They came home and they took a close one from the Sparks. They then got boat raced, really is the word I would say, by the Aces, the one good team that they've played. But they go into Indiana where they played over the weekend. They have another game tonight here on Tuesday against the Fever, the other team that everybody thought they were going to be with. And Ryan was absolutely sensational, wasn't she, Spencer?
She was. I have watched that quarterback probably 3 or 4 times to this point. But again, I hate to harp on, last season because that was such a depressing watch, but it really, what we saw in these, first slate of games, and especially against Indiana, what Rhyne Howard was doing is just not something the Dream were able to do last year. I know that Alex can attribute to, teams in the W have rough patches. The Dream had an awful season last year. But what we're seeing here is some hope. I think what Rhyne Howard has brought to the Dream, a team that was supposed to finish at best 10th and at most realistic projections 11th, what we're seeing from this team because of Rhyne Howard is a team that might be ready to compete, sooner rather than later. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, though.
I would not want to overtake it just simply because, as I've pointed out, the competition maybe has been on the weaker end. They still haven't seen any of the teams that you would have projected to be heavily in the lottery discussion, except for the Aces. And on top of that, the one time they did see the Aces, it did not necessarily go all that well. But there's a lot to take away from this, and especially because everything about this is so brand new. And we're so early in the WNBA season, you don't want to overtake away kind of team trends. But I do kind of want to point out that outside of Rhyne, there's really not anybody else that's stepping up on the offensive end, and they really haven't had a good offense for the most part, which is both a testament then to how much she has been able to kind of help carry them in these moments where they're without Hayes, but also a testament to just kind of how they're figuring things out. But her individual talent seems to be able to kind of overwhelm in that regard.
Right. I think it's a real 2-pronged approach, both with the defense and just how the Dream have set up Rhyne Howard. I think that you have players on the roster like, Cheyenne Parker, to an extent, Christy Wallace, Ari McDonald, some other names, who are able to score, 15 points a game if need be. But as I believe you mentioned, there isn't another player on the roster who's averaging more than 10 points per game. What the Dream are doing in this instance is they're trying to set up Rhyne Howard in a situation to succeed early. When you watch back clips from last year, players like Kennedy Carter, Tiffany Hayes, Courtney Williams, they didn't really have any space to operate. if you look at what the Dream are doing, they're creating space for Rhyne Howard. That might not mean that players are, creating off the bounce. They're creating shots for themselves, but what they are doing is they're opening up the floor for Rhyne to succeed. The shots that she's getting, they're spot up opportunities off, an extra pass, driving kick. In the Indiana game, especially, Rhyne started showing off the mid range, which was only open because she was sharing the floor with, 3 to 4 other players who can, hit from outside. So, it definitely starts in the defensive end in terms of the success they've had early. But as it pertains to Howard, I mean, it's all in terms of the actions that they're giving her.
I will say, too, you bring up the mid-range and her ability to drive. She got to the free throw line 17 times. She had 17 free throw attempts, not got to the line, but had 17 free throw attempts. That's something that has happened less than 50 times in the entire existence of the WNBA. There's the most free throws ever taken in a single game was 24, which the two players, if you want to take a guess, you might be able to figure it out. But Cynthia Cooper and Tina Charles are the two players to take 24. But a player doing that in her 4th career game in the league of attacking, being aggressive, getting to the line that much just seems kind of mind-blowing. And especially to end the night, the stats are just absolutely incredible, but it's also not that surprising in that sense. 9 for 18 from the field, 3 for 8 from 3, but 12 for 17 from the free throw line. I feel like that's the part that no matter what you can take away, if she's able to continue to be that aggressive and they're able to create those avenues, whether for her to get the baskets at the lane or get fouled, that's got to be maybe the biggest revelation of everything that she's been able to do, right?
Right. And the thing is, she is not even fully unlocked yet. When you mentioned the free throws, I think that definitely pertains to the motor that, people like to harp on. They were saying at the, before the year started, that might be a big concern with her. And I think, she's taken that a bit personally. I think it's something that she's really wanted to show, I'm ready for the W. I'm ready to show out, for however many minutes a game she's playing. I think it's in the mid 30s at this point. It's something that she's really, worked on. And I think it's a testament to not only her character, but just her drive to compete. When you talk about just the opportunities she's had, especially, at the free throw line with that aggressiveness, that's something that really can pertain back to that character I was just talking about. And when we look at the season ahead, that's the sort of thing that's sustainable. I think there are areas of her game, maybe, off ball and especially at the rim, where she could stand to improve. But when you're taking 17 free throws in a game, it's really hard to critique that. There will, I'm sure, at some point be growing pains with this season. There has to be. No rookie puts up numbers like this for an entire year, unless maybe, Rhyne Howard is that rookie. But,
and again, the competition becomes the more important thing. She's doing this against teams where you could see maybe opportunities to explode like this, but she's going to have to face the Connecticut Sun multiple times this season, the Chicago Sky multiple times this season, the Seattle Storm, all of the teams out west multiple times this season. Other than Los Angeles and Vegas, she hasn't seen anybody in that regard yet. So you don't want to overhype the small sample, but there are takeaways I think you can see from this where you can't ignore what you're watching in the idea of small sample size, which a lot of analytically inclined people would say it's only 4 games, but you can still learn a lot from 4 games. A lot of people tell you can learn a lot from a single game. And I think what we've learned from this 4 games is that I don't think Atlanta's going to regret anything that they did in moving up to get her and using the assets that they did to get her.
Oh, absolutely not. Washington is the team probably, regretting some things right now. But when you mention even a single game and you talk about that Vegas game, one thing I know they did super well in that, contest was just cracking down on the 3-point line. And I'm sure that, as teams continue to scout Ryan and get more film on her, they're going to be playing her closer. They're going to, they'll continue to collapse on the players around her, but they're going to, collapse on her the most. They're going to focus on her, especially at the 3-point line. So as you said, I mean, you can learn things from an individual game. And I'm sure that one thing she'll have to deal with going forward is just teams focusing more and more on her.
I also, by the way, should point out Washington is 3-1 entering Tuesday. So I'm not really sure they're regretting what they did, but Ryan does look like a potential generational talent here. And speaking of, if you are interested, PricePicks.com allows you to use the promo code NBA to download and make daily fantasy made easy. The NBA conference finals are starting tonight with the East. The West is tomorrow. You have Major League Baseball, even women's basketball. Yes, the WNBA should be a part of Price Picks. If you go to prizepicks.com, use the promo code NBA, or go to the App Store to download the app today. Also, thanks to the Locked On Podcast Network, Built Bar can be yours. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Go to builtbar.com and use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Yes, that's builtbar.com, promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order from Built Bars. And you can tell them that Howard's mom, Grandma Myrna, sent you that way to get the good loving from Built Bar. So when you look at it with this Atlanta team, to kind of look at the way they've been built here, it is going to kind of build around Rhyne, and you want to let those growing pains happen. But how much, even as those happen, how much can what we're seeing right now kind of be the soft landing, if you will, if you do have games where, you go 2 for 14, where you turn the ball over 7 times, to kind of have this happen so early? Is that something that you kind of have to balance the whole, like, is this fool's gold, or is this is the ceiling or the potential? Even if you're not reaching it, we see where that's at to use.
Right. And I understand. I think that it's something that the team is actively gauging. I mean, that's why you see her getting so many shot opportunities every game. It's not just because she's a great player, but it's because the team has this long-term vision ahead. Even, Ari McDonald's is another testament that speaks to this. She's someone who has, her shot attempts have gone up this year because the team wants to focus on what do we have for the long-term future. If there are games ahead, and I'm sure that there will be games ahead where she's, missing a lot of shots, where, Ryan, Ari, the rest of the team is missing shots, there's still things to be learned from that. I think the team is also learning right now, where its future might head without Tiffany Hayes. This isn't something, I'm reporting, but one has to speculate to see, what can Ryan do as the focal point of an offense. And then once Tiffany is back, what can she do, as a sidekick or as a tandem with another, great on-ball creator? These are the sort of things that the team wants to learn. In addition to how it can construct not only its offense, but I think its defense is a big part of it. When you look at the, offseason subtraction of Elizabeth Williams, I remember in our preseason predictions, I predicted that the Dream would have the worst defense in the WNBA. Right now, they are ranked as the first defense in the WNBA.
I was going to say, those were anonymous polls, so you're outing yourself as having kind of maybe missed, at least, again, it's early, but you swung the other way in that regard, thinking they were the worst, and so far they are the number 1 rated defense in the league.
Yeah, this is why I don't know why people listen to me, but regardless, the Dream have had a really strong defense thus far, and the area where I thought they would thrive was on this, perimeter defense. They have, again, it's early, they haven't played great competition, but the health defense has been phenomenal. And coming out of college, Rhyne Howard was a phenomenal off-ball help team defender. I think that you're learning that she can be, it's hard to be the focal point of an offense and a defense that's reserved for, the Asia Wilsons, the Stewies of the world. But, Rhyne Howard is someone who, I don't want to speak too soon. I don't want to say that she can be, in that trajectory, but you want to learn how she can be the focal point of an offense and a defense.
And look, offense can be entirely individualistic in that regard, and a single person's individual talent can, on the offensive end, really take over. Defense has to be collective. It has to be 5 players playing in concert with each other, working together, helping cover things. There are individual talented defenders who can take over games on the defensive end, but you really never are going to see people truly become the type of one-on-one defenders outside of playing somebody one-on-one. And to me, defense is always about buy-in. Does this coaching staff have buy-in? At least so far, it seems like absolutely they do on the defensive end, in particular with Tanisha Wright.
Yeah, Tanisha Wright was talking about defense more than she was offense at the start of the season. I should have learned something. But she came into this, position after being a defensive-minded player in the W. Her coaching staff, I think, additionally, is also very defensive-minded. So it's something that they harped on during training camp. It's something that they have really focused on at the start of the season. And, it's too early for me to say at this point in the season, especially with all the new additions, who is a fantastic, intelligent, on-ball defender, who has the, highest IQ. But as you said, this team has buy-in, and that's not something they had, last season. So that's something that's paid off really early and really strong in the defensive end.
I do think you're underselling what they didn't have last season in terms of buy-in is a very good point to take away here. You mentioned Aerie McDonald, and I do find it interesting. She has been coming off the bench, but her minutes are up to 22 plus a game, and she's currently tied for the second highest scoring average of anybody on the Dream so far this season. It's her and Cheyenne Parker, both at 9.8. So nobody other than Rhyne is above 10 points a game. Ryan's all the way up at 20.8 so far through 4. That's pretty good, I got to say. Just got to say that's pretty good. But at 9.8, Aerie, how have you felt the Aerie and Ryan kind of 2 or maybe 3 guard looks if they have her out with Erica Wheeler at times? How have you felt they've been able to play off of each other?
It's something that definitely will take more than this 4-game sample because, their minutes to an extent have been a little staggered, but they have played together for, vast stretches of the game because Rhyne Howard, again, gets so many minutes in every single game. When you look at the minutes that they have together and just the future that you project out, Ryan is technically a guard, but she's 6'2". So when she's playing along someone in Aerie McDonald who's listed at 5'6", and that might be a little generous, you're looking at a team that can run out 3 guards per se who can have these sort of perimeter options because Ryan can fill in on the offensive and defensive end of the floor with her height. I think it's something that can work really well in the future as well. Because as we've touched on, when Rhyne Howard has space to operate, she's a phenomenal player. And if Aerie McDonald, she's not going to continue hitting 50% of her threes, but she can be a knockdown 3-point shooter in this league, on the ball, off the ball. So when you combine those 2 talents, I think it's something that's really promising for the Dream. Coming into the season, I wasn't entirely sure whether the Dream were, actually viewing Aerie as a long-term, central piece of their core. I wasn't sure, even despite everything she did at Arizona, and I am a huge Aerie fan in that regard. I don't know how sure I was of her as an elite player in the W. I don't think that that's necessarily the view I should have been taking. It was, can she be an important rotational piece of a championship team? And with her on-ball defense, with her 3-point shooting, with her attacking, she obviously can be, and I think she'd be a great fit, alongside Ryan in the future.
And look, even if you end up in a way where she never starts, you still need somebody to be that 3rd guard, or depending on how you rotate 4 guards if you start 3, but you need somebody to be able to come off the bench and kind of blend in across positions. What Ryan can do so well that I think everybody pointed out, but we've seen so much of the offense, it's hard to point out. When you're 6'2" and can still guard guards on the defensive end, that is immensely valuable and makes you switchable. And a player like Aerie with her size probably isn't as switchable onto bigger players, but Ryan can be, which is how the 2 of them could end up blending. If they try to throw into pick and roll, a Ryan Aerie defensive pick and roll, Ryan can at least flash and then slide back. And I think that defensively, with how quick Aerie's hands are, they could be a pretty lethal front court on defense in that regard. Backcourt.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. Backcourt, definitely not front court. But yeah, no,
not Aerie's height, at least.
No, probably not. But with Ryan and Aerie, the other thing that comes to mind is that the Dream this past offseason, they weren't necessarily able to attract marquee free agents. I think that the league is, it can't not be taking notice of what Rhyne Howard and to an extent Aerie McDonald are doing right now. And the culture that Tanisha Wright is building, and just the team that Dan Padover, the general manager, has put together. The team, it's hard to say whether a year from now they'll necessarily be, attracting the top 2 or 3 names in the W. They will definitely have the cap space for it, but many teams will. But in the years down the line, Rhyne Howard is the sort of player that I feel like someone would want to play alongside. She's got, for all the criticism, she does indeed have that motor. She has the talent, and I think teams players are especially drawn to her personality as well. I think that's shown up early, even though she's more of a reserve personality. I think that's something that the team has really appreciated early. I think that when the team looks ahead, and we've talked a lot about this long-term vision with the Dream. We're only 4 games into this season, but that culture headlined by Ryan is something to pay attention to.
And I do want to kind of get into a little bit of the future. Before we do that, though, I want to remind you that if you really like this Dream team and think that they're going to win games like potentially Tuesday nights against the Fever, head on over to BetOnline. And BetOnline.net has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Like we said with Prize Picks, we've got the NBA Conference Finals starting up. Major League Baseball's in full swing. We just got the NFL schedule, so if you really are thinking football already, but especially if you got WNBA games that you're really interested in, head over to Bet Online. Bet Online, where the game starts. To think in the future, you mentioned something that I found very interesting earlier, and I want to come back to before we wrap up here about Tiffany Hayes. She is not going to play in Tuesday's game against the Fever, so that's the 5th game that she's going to miss before. I would think you would assume she kind of gets worked back in after this game, correct?
Yeah.
So to look at it, she signed a 1-year deal here. And how much do you think then, where even if you're not reporting on it, but how much are you thinking about these games as maybe thinking to next year where Hayes, she's 32, going to turn 33 during the kind of FIBA World Cup time, but by next season, she'll be entering free agency as a 33-year-old. And she stated she probably wants to go win a title and at least try for a title. Atlanta, does what this happen make you think that less likely that it would be a fit for the both of them again next year? If she's thinking title and Atlanta's thinking, let's start to build around Ryan, but that might not be title in 2023 type building?
I will say this, Rhyne Howard cannot be the face of a championship team if she is the only star on the team. I have a very high view of Tiffany Hayes, and I think it would be beneficial for the team to keep her on for at least a few more years to show, how she and Ryan can work together and potentially adding, one more star to that mix. But, as it pertains to Tiffany Hayes, especially, again, this is not reporting. This is more, speculating based on what I know about the franchise, what I know about, Tiffany, and what I know about just the WNBA landscape as a whole. I'm not sure that she will be here for more than, this season. She has spent so much time in Atlanta. She has spent time as the face of Atlanta, as the Robin, the Batman. She has played basically every role for this franchise. And I think when I have talked with her, people who are close to her in the past, whether it's, family or past teammates, winning is the thing that's most important to Tiffany Hayes. And, to be on this dream roster for 3 more years when, championship aspirations really aren't part of the program, it's really hard to say that she'll be in Atlanta next season. I would see her more opting for, a secondary, ball creating role on a really, really talented roster, where that would be hard to say.
But we just also saw this happen this offseason for a prominent longtime player with the dream in Elizabeth Williams, who potentially could have gotten more money to stay in Atlanta if that was a fit both saw there. But she went, probably took less money than she could have gotten if she was chasing every dollar because she found a good fit for her. And she's going to be starting with the Mystics here shortly on the floor. And that's a team that looks really sharp right now and is probably going to be in the mix for a championship run come the playoff time. That is something that Hayes decided to come back to Atlanta, ostensibly not to do. Obviously, if this run keeps up and she meshes, we can have a very different podcast 3 weeks from now or less than that if that's happening. But it seems like there's a way for the present of Hayes, kind of the past and the present of the dream, to help shape the future. And even if they do part ways after a season here, it can be very amicable in doing that for both parties, I would assume.
Right. And, Tiffany Hayes is someone who's used to winning. She won in high school. She, obviously was at UConn. She won there. I think the team would be happy to, not happy to see her go, but happy to see her in, a positive situation after she, spent so many years in Atlanta, helping create for many years, helping create a positive culture and a positive atmosphere and a winning culture. I want to be very clear. I'm not saying she contributed to the negative culture last year, but she was a part of some really strong years in Atlanta. I would be more surprised to see her be on the roster 2 years from now than I would be to see her elsewhere competing for a championship on a roster.
She's on a 1-year deal. It is a little bit pricey and cap space is very fluid and strange, but would she be somebody that you think Atlanta, if there was interest in a way for another team to make the cap space work, would be interested in even trading for her? Or is this a point where you think the plan is to have her kind of mold the team and the young players throughout the entire season as she's getting ready to come back into the fold here?
I had not considered that possibility, and it's especially something to take note of when you think that probably 10 to now, if Atlanta's here, 11 teams are competing for the playoffs. I think Tiffany Hayes is the sort of player who can mesh on any roster and bring a team that might be in 7th or 8th up to, 4th or maybe, actually competing for a championship. So it's something to consider on another team's part. Whether Atlanta is actually willing to do it, I would say is pretty unlikely. I don't think that they, necessarily need another, great asset unless it is, a lottery pick next year. I'm not sure that they want to sacrifice maybe a mid to late first round pick or, get a mid to late first round pick in lieu of an actual, culture and character and the player that Tiffany Hayes is.
And let me be clear, she's making $215,000 this year. It would be very difficult for any team to make the cap space match with who they trade away in order to bring her in. But it's just a thought that I wanted to ask you while I had you here and before we wrapped up. Spencer, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Where can the people find you and your work this season?
Oh, they got to find me at Spencer Nusbaum _ on Twitter. That's definitely the place to be. I'm trying to get those followers up, trying to get everyone, interested in the W.
If you want to get those followers up, make sure you spell that last name. I think most people can get Spencer, but for our audio crowd here, how do you spell the last name there?
Oh, that's a great point. That's Nusbaum.
So Spencer, Nusbaum _ on Twitter. And as always, at The Next, covering the Atlanta Dream for the fabulous crew that we have at The Next that partners with us here at the Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast. I'm Alex Simon. You can find me at Bay Area News Group and at Alex Simon Sports. Thank you guys for joining us on this Tuesday. Enjoy your evening of WNBA basketball.